The Grande Armée, the largest army Europe had ever seen. More than 600,000 men, French soldiers, Poles, Germans, Italians, Dutch troops, an empire marching together under one emperor. And Napoleon believed there was only one power left that could challenge him: Russia. The problem wasn't personal hatred, it was economics. Napoleon had created something called the Continental System. Its purpose was simple: destroy Britain without invading it. Since Britain ruled the seas, Napoleon tried to strangle its economy instead. European countries were forbidden from trading with Britain. But Russia was suffering badly under these restrictions. Its economy weakened, its nobles were angry, trade collapsed. Eventually, Tsar Alexander I slowly reopened trade with Britain. To Napoleon, this was betrayal. But invading Russia was insane. Even his allies warned him. Russia was too large, too far, too cold. And supply lines across that distance were almost impossible. But Napoleon believed something dangerous. Every enemy had surrendered after one decisive defeat. He assumed Russia would do the same. That assumption would destroy him. In June 1812, the Grande Armée crossed into Russia. It looked unstoppable. Thousands of horses, cannons stretching for miles, soldiers marching in perfect formation. It was one of the most intimidating military forces in human history. Napoleon expected a fast victory, one huge battle, one Russian defeat, one peace agreement. Done. But the Russians refused to play his game. Instead of fighting immediately, they retreated. Again, and again, and again. Every time Napoleon moved forward, the Russians moved deeper into their own country. And as they retreated, they burned everything behind them. Fields destroyed, villages abandoned, food supplies gone. This strategy had a terrifying purpose: starve Napoleon's army. The real enemy appeared long before winter: distance. The deeper the French army marched, the longer its supply lines became. Food wagons broke down, horses died from exhaustion, roads turned into mud. Soldiers began starving months before the snow arrived. Disease spread everywhere. And here's the shocking part: most men who died in Russia never died in battle. They died from hunger, exhaustion, sickness, and collapse. But Napoleon kept moving forward because he still believed one thing: one final battle would fix everything. Finally, near Moscow, the Russians turned and fought. The Battle of Borodino. One of the bloodiest battles of the entire Napoleonic Wars. Tens of thousands died in a single day. The French technically won, but it wasn't a real victory. The Russian army survived. And that changed everything.
After Borodino, Napoleon entered Moscow. This should have been the moment he won. The ancient capital of Russia, the symbolic heart of the empire. Napoleon expected the Tsar to surrender. Instead, he found something horrifying. The city was nearly empty. Most civilians had fled. And then Moscow began to burn. Massive fires spread through the city. Buildings collapsed. Smoke filled the sky. Supplies vanished. Napoleon waited for peace negotiations. None came. Days passed, then weeks. Still nothing. And suddenly Napoleon realized the truth. The Russians were willing to lose Moscow, to destroy him. This was the moment everything changed. Napoleon should have retreated earlier, but he delayed, and that delay became fatal. People often say Napoleon lost because of winter. That's only partially true. The snow didn't destroy him. His decisions did. Napoleon entered Russia too late in the year. He stayed in Moscow too long, and worst of all, he assumed his army could survive the retreat. It could not. When the French finally began retreating in October, winter was approaching fast. Then came the freezing temperatures. Horses collapsed in the snow. Cannons were abandoned. Men froze while marching. Some soldiers slept beside fires and never woke up. Others ate horse meat just to survive. Entire units vanished during snowstorms. And the retreat became even worse because Russian forces constantly attacked from behind. Not giant heroic battles, just endless pressure, ambushes, raids, starvation. The Grande Armée slowly stopped existing. Then came the moment many historians consider the true breaking point, the Berezina River, November 1812. The French army reached the river while Russian forces closed in around them. The bridges were destroyed. Freezing water moved beneath sheets of ice. Panic spread everywhere. French engineers desperately built temporary bridges while soldiers and civilians crowded the banks. Then chaos exploded. Cannons fired, people pushed each other into the river, wagons overturned. Thousands drowned, thousands froze. The crossing succeeded, but the army that escaped barely resembled the one that entered Russia months earlier. This wasn't a retreat anymore. It was survival. When Napoleon entered Russia, he led over 600,000 men. When he escaped, only a fraction remained combat-ready. The greatest army in Europe had been destroyed, and suddenly the illusion was gone. Europe realized Napoleon could bleed. His enemies united again. Prussia rebelled. Austria returned to war. New coalitions formed. And from this point forward, Napoleon was never truly the same. Yes, he would still fight brilliant battles. Yes, he would briefly return after exile. But the myth of invincibility died in Russia. The empire began collapsing from that moment onward, all because of one fatal belief, that Russia would surrender like everyone else. The most powerful part of this story is that Napoleon didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because success changed the way he thought. For years, bold risks had always worked, so he stopped believing limits applied to him. And history is filled with people like that. Leaders, empires, companies. They become so successful, they confuse past victories with permanent invincibility. Napoleon conquered most of Europe, but in the end, he was defeated by distance, pride, time, and one terrible assumption, that the world would continue obeying the rules that once made him unstoppable. It didn't. And somewhere in the frozen silence of Russia, the greatest empire in Europe began to die.